Hey there, welcome back to the business behind the game, where we break down the business side of sports from emerging trends to the people and companies shaping the industry today. I'm Kush, and today we have a really exciting guest, Evan Alexander. Evan is a former college athlete turned entrepreneur who spent nearly 8 years in corporate America at Texas Instruments before leaving to found Pivot Athletic Consulting, a company built to help student athletes make smart NIL and money decisions while preparing for life beyond the game. Before we start today, Evan, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to be here.
Yep, I'm really excited to get this started. So, take me back to the beginning. You were a college athlete with big expectations coming in. Take us back to that time. What did your athletic career look like going in, and what were you expecting from it?
Oh man, going back to that time is nostalgic. But going into it, coming out of my senior year, I was MVP at my high school. I was probably top guy on campus. I got the biggest scholarship coming out of my high school class.
Mhm.
Going into Southern University, I actually got off to a really hot start. I was already, kind of playing with the ones, and my expectation was that, I would hit the ground running and,
Yeah,
be like gangbusters. I
yeah,
had the hoop dreams, making it to the league.
yeah.
Being that I saw myself as being a young Shannon Sharp coming from a HBCU and going, to the NFL and having the illustrious career.
Mhm.
I always knew, going to a HBCU would be a tougher path, but coming out, I got recruited by, Auburn, Tulane,
Mhm.
and several other, high profile schools. And, the recruiting process was murky at best. It was really hot and heavy, and then all of a sudden it kind of went away. And then I didn't even know if I was going to make it, to the college
Yeah.
ranks until Southern came along and offered me a scholarship. So,
Mhm.
it just kind of taught me a lesson about the recruiting process, even then, that you never know until the paper's in front of you and it's time to sign. Nothing's in stone. So
Mhm.
I had high hopes and high expectations and got off to a hot start. And tragic tragically, I kind of hurt injuries kind of took hold three
Yeah.
days into camp. And I
Yeah.
dislocated my kneecap kind of early. So, but yeah, I had high hopes from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to. Your injuries just that was my next question. Actually, was like you dislocated your knee freshman year, and then you tore your ACL in the same knee shortly after. And obviously, tearing your ACL is a devastating blow for any athlete. What was going through your mind in those moments, and like how did that change your relationship with the sport?
Yeah, it was pretty devastating. Even the dislocation,
Yeah,
patella dislocation was pretty critical. I can vividly remember riding in the ambulance, getting pumped with morphine, and the icy feeling, of it pumping through, to kill the pain. Feeling like, man, I haven't even started yet, and it's already
yeah,
it's already over.
yeah,
And it just it set in that question of, what now? What am
mm,
I going to do? I had all these high expectations of myself and, my athletic career, and it forced me into a very harsh reality really early into my athletic career
mm,
to really, look at the situation and say, what am I going to get out of this for myself? I can give all my efforts into my sport, but if I don't get anything out of it that is actually something I can parlay into, a career after, what have I actually done for myself? So it,
mm,
it began kind of setting the seeds for literally what I'm doing today, helping athletes to navigate the athletic landscape and prepare for life beyond sports.
yeah,
And the ACL injury only reinforced that reality that, this could be gone just as soon as, it came up. So
yeah.
I think it just kind of shifted my perspective into making sure that I prioritized my education and making sure that I was getting something, much more tangible than
Mm.
just, the stories and the highlights that came from the athletic career.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely makes sense because even in the professional leagues, there's definitely athletes who expect to play a long time and they have injuries or something else which slows down their
Yeah.
career a lot, and then if they don't prioritize their financials early, it can definitely lead to a problem.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
And before you founded Athletic Consulting, you spent nearly 8 years at Texas Instruments, working your way up to becoming the regional pricing manager. That's like some serious corporate career. What did you learn in that environment, which you don't think you could have learned anywhere else?
Man, that journey was very interesting.
Mm,
I actually feel like my athletic career really gave me the secret sauce for my professional career. In
mm,
corporate, the things that I learned on the field were the things that actually separated me from my peers in corporate. Being
mm,
able to be coachable, being able to, sacrifice and be disciplined. The things that, we kind of take for granted sometimes in sports because
yeah.
it's just kind of part of the cliche things coaches say, but those characteristics really carried over and still, benefit me today. From a corporate perspective, um, it really taught me the cycles and perspective from a high level business. Like business operates in cycles.
Yeah.
They you have first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. They're coming back around, and everybody's assessing the short term and the long term simultaneously.
Yeah.
So it forced me to be analytical as well as strategic in a way that I had never done, before. So being able to mix that corporate strategy along with the athletic, grit and discipline was really what made me successful.
Mm, okay. Yeah, I mean definitely I think getting early corporate experience is always something that's useful, especially to the level that you did it as well.
Yeah.
So now I want to shift over to you building Pivot Athletic Consulting. At some point, you made the decision to leave a stable, successful corporate career and go all into your Pivot Athletic Consulting company. And obviously, going from a stable career to a business is a scary move for anyone. What was a moment you were like, okay, I think it's time to make that leap and move on?
Yeah, it was definitely a scary move. I can't be honest with myself or anyone else to say that it wasn't, but I'm a man of faith. I believe in God and that relationship. He put that desire in me to really help people, help athletes,
Mm,
and how the landscape shifted. It opened the door, which I'm totally excited for and happy that athletes are able to be paid and compensated. Because when I was playing, that wasn't even a thing. If you
yeah.
got caught with some type of situation where you could be ineligible just for taking a meal or taking a trip from someone,
Mm,
where your coaches are out here making millions of dollars, that
yeah.
there was always an inequity. And I always felt that there was a place for me to intersect sport and business.
Mm,
I think my initial goal was to go off and be a GM for some NFL team and go win a
mm,
Super Bowl as a GM, right?
yeah.
But that wasn't my lot in life, at least early on. But ultimately, I felt that God had led me to this point that
Mm,
it was time to go and do this and really help impact the lives of young men and young women in the athletic space to share, my story, share my experience, and help them navigate, a landscape that's truly a very nuanced and,
mm.
shifting landscape all the time. So it definitely was a scary move, but definitely one I took in faith and belief that, God will carry me through it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially you just mentioned about the NIL landscape. It's definitely a confusing space, and I think the more athletes that can get help with that, they can definitely get some more opportunities. S-
Absolutely.
So in terms of Pivot Athletic Consulting, you just obviously we know that the basics of it is just mostly helping athletes with NIL deals. Can you break it down for us and really like go more in depth into what problem you're solving and what Pivot Athletic Consulting does?
Yeah, 100%. And it's even deeper than just the deals. It's really the athlete as a person. So what
Yeah.
my goal is, the problem that I'm obsessed with is really helping athletes and families make better decisions, and that's
Yeah.
across the board, from an identity standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a career planning standpoint,
Hmm.
for building vision for their lives, beyond the game. I believe that
Yeah.
um, being an athlete is really a persona, an identity that isn't lasting forever. The
Yeah.
the person that is inside the jersey is the real identity, the real person,
Yeah.
and the only way you really know who you truly are, in my opinion, is really being connected to Christ and understanding that His vision for you is who you truly are, because that's
Hmm.
my I created, right?
Yeah.
So being locked into understanding who you are compounds and helps you to make better decisions for from an athletic perspective, like the decisions where you choose to go to school, the brand
Hmm.
deals that you choose to to take because of the values, how they align with your personal values, where you want to go from a career beyond sports. If you can understand who you are, you have a better understanding and better path to be able to build a life beyond sports. And that's
Yeah.
truly the goal that I have with Pivot, is to help athletes understand you are the secret sauce.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that person, your true identity, who you are, helps you gives you that trajectory to build that path and build that blueprint for the rest of your life. Even if you
Yeah.
have a successful athletic career, at best you're looking at being 30, 35 years old and being done. And there's so much
Yeah.
more life beyond that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to help athletes to understand and start building towards that life even while you're still playing. It's not
Yeah.
that you're having a plan B to your plan A. It's expanding on your
Yeah.
plan A and building on top of it. I look at the NIL landscape, and athletes are, the hot commodity from a branding perspective, from
Hmm.
a marketing perspective. Everybody, wants to be associated with the athletes,
Yeah.
and because of that, you have the opportunity to build, a platform for yourself, and
Hmm.
one that you can actually own, not one that ends the minute your eligibility runs up or you get hurt. If you
Yeah.
build a platform for yourself, you get people invested in the person who's behind the jersey, and then once you're inevitably done with your athletic career, you've built something that can sustain even beyond your playing days.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think just being in a sports career in general is very unique because you never know when it could end, and
Yeah.
even if the best it can go 35, maybe 40 years, is that's how
Mm-hmm.
old you're gonna be by the time you're done. But you still have a lot of life left to live, and no matter how
100%.
much money you make, you still need to be financially stable throughout.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah. You said like in your LinkedIn post that you've built the NIL playbook, which you wish that you had. What does that mean specifically, and what mistakes were you seeing athletes making that you saw out from the outside perspective and realize, I can jump in and help these athletes out here?
100%. Yeah. That playbook obviously didn't involve NIL specifically at the
Okay.
time, I was in college, right?
Mhm.
NIL wasn't a thing. I was just happy to be on the video game that, obviously kind of birthed what NIL became. The
Yeah.
O'Bannon and Keller cases that, went to Supreme Court, obviously, birthed what NIL is today.
Mm.
It for me, it was really the transition after the game. I saw
Mhm.
so many athletes struggle from a life perspective when their
Mhm.
playing careers were done, struggling with identity, who they are, what were they going to do from a career perspective, a life perspective once their playing days were done. And I had seen it. I went through it myself. Having
Yeah.
had torn my ACL, 3 times by the time it was all said and done. I had some identity crises myself, and
Yeah.
those were some real struggles and dark times. And that passion to, really help athletes navigate those instances was something that just kind of never left. And I wanted
Yeah.
to build something to be able to, help them along that journey, because
Mhm.
it truly is a struggle. A lot of athletes get so caught up in the athlete persona, the athlete identity, they've never had the opportunity to explore, any other identities
Mm.
that they may have, any other interests, because they've been so honed in on being the best possible athlete that they can be. And not that that's a bad thing. It's part of what makes athletes great is
Yeah.
being able to focus in and lock in on a specific task, but at the same time, when it's done, if you don't have something else to fall back on, then you wind up spiraling. And I've seen,
Yeah.
as some athletes be in some real dark places because of it. And I, instead of just sitting on the sidelines and talking about it, I wanted to get out there and do something about it. And because of the, business career that I had created for myself, it literally created the blueprint for
Mm.
athletes being able to one protect the foundation. The first part of my career was actually at targeting investigations, mitigating shortage inside multi-million dollar company,
Mm.
and then from the TI perspective, going on the offensive and negotiating multi-million dollar deals.
Yeah.
So my career almost made the blueprint for me from a business standpoint to get
Mm.
the offense and defense from the playbook side. So I took that knowledge and applied it to
Yeah.
what I knew in from an athletic perspective, and having literally lived the athlete life cycle,
Mm.
putting that together and building that playbook to say, regardless of where you are in the athlete life cycle, we're able to assist in that process. If you're just beginning and you don't have any understanding of the recruiting process and what that looks like, or you're kind of in the middle and you're navigating deals, or at the end when you're transitioning out, we have a playbook for you to be able to
Mm.
transition and
Mm.
navigate those specific situations to the best of the ability.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to follow up on one thing you just mentioned earlier about the identity crisis. I
Mm-hmm.
know over like people's careers, especially athletes, they get very attached to the fact they are an athlete. You know, they see themselves
Yep.
like as a basketball player, they see themselves as a football player. What do you think are first of all the problems that come with that, and also where do you think that's developed from?
Such a great question. I think it stems from, the focus that it really takes to be a great athlete. You know,
Mm.
it takes a lot of time and effort and sacrifice in order to be great, right? In order to be a successful athlete, you got to spend time away from family, working out. You got early
Yeah.
mornings, you got late nights, and all that makes you successful as an athlete. And to a degree you have to have it, but I think a lot of times athletes don't necessarily take um, a step back to see what they enjoy outside of just being an
Yeah.
athlete. That is really the dichotomy, and it's difficult. I won't even sugarcoat it and say that it's easy to do. It's not.
Yeah.
In order to be good at what you're doing, you have to put in that time, put in that work, and there's always someone coming behind you trying to take your spot, take your job.
Yeah.
And that kind of maniacal thought process kind of forces athletes to sit in that one lane. And I think it's ultimately on the support system around that
Mm.
athlete to help them to, hey, take a step back, let's explore some other things, even if it's just for a moment,
Yeah.
a few minutes here, an hour there. What other things are you interested in?
Mm.
Having those deep conversations with family and friends to understand what are those things outside of sport that you might be interested in, that you might want to explore beyond sport. And I
Yeah.
think the more athletes can do that and exercise, exploring the different identities, only helps them to be that much more layered as a person. So
Yeah.
it's such a deep, it's such a deep thing that athletes go through, and most people don't really understand it if unless they were athletes.
Mm.
If you haven't gone through those processes and gone through the early mornings and the late nights, You don't necessarily
Yeah.
understand how you get to that point, of being kind of locked into that one persona and one identity. But like I said, I think it's incumbent of the support system around them in order to help them to explore, those other layers of their identity.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I think I was saying the same thing. Just the environment you surround yourself with, especially people who don't know you as well. I mean, I'm sure you went through this. That those people at school who weren't your friends would maybe know you as just a basketball player, but
Yeah,
your friends definitely know you as somebody much more than that. And I think from an outside perspective, looking in, it plays a huge role in the
absolutely.
identity crisis. I wanted to shift over now a little bit more to the NIL landscape.
Sure.
Obviously, NIL is huge and it's changed college sports dramatically since like
Yeah.
2021. From where you sit, like advising athletes every single day, what do you think is the biggest misconception athletes and their families have about NIL?
Yeah, it is. And it's the difficult part about it, it's always changing. Like it's
Yeah.
almost daily where you're getting updates on different laws, and because of, there's federal laws, there's state laws, and sometimes they're contradicting depending on where you are. But I think the biggest misconception is the understanding of what NIL actually is. So
Yeah.
NIL is truly a marketplace, right? Because you have the opportunity to leverage your name, image, and likeness
Mm-hmm.
to monetize, who you are within the athletic realm. A lot of folks have the perspective that, I just need to be good at a sport and I'm going to get paid either, from the
Yeah.
school or from the collective. And, there's misconception on, and now the revenue sharing piece adds
Mm-hmm.
an added layer to it. But ultimately, NIL just means that you have the ability to monetize your name, your likeness, your image, right?
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that you can build a brand, and building a brand on who you are, not necessarily the athlete, but the person, allows you the opportunity to be able to um, own your platform, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily just rent it when while you're, a high profile athlete.
Yeah.
If you're able to lean into the person you are, if you're I just read an article talking about how Wimby was in New York in a park after game three. I mean, I know it didn't benefit in game four, obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he was out drawing in the park, kind
Yeah.
of separating himself from, the athlete persona for a minute, and doing
Mm-hmm.
something different to expand on, his identity, and I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing thing. He's
Right.
really turned into one of my favorite athletes just from his mentality of, really being great at what he's doing, but also being expansive in his thought process on
Yeah.
how he views himself, how he views his brand, and how he plans to, build on top of that. I think that's amazing in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But NIL, like I said, is there's tons of misinformation and misconception on what it is, and what the true benefits are. And that's I feel like that's my role in this landscape, is helping athletes, one, just understand the differences in the different avenues. Obviously revenue sharing and NIL deals are two totally different things from a business perspective, from a
Yeah.
tax perspective. And all those have little nuances underneath them that, athletes need to be aware of. Most athletes have never even heard of a 1099 or a W-2 because they've been athletes their whole life and never
Yeah.
had a real job in most cases.
Yeah.
So understanding those nuances and how to leverage them is, what I help athletes with on day in, day out basis.
Yep, yep, definitely. And you were just mentioning about the financials of the contract, and I think that's definitely one of the most interesting parts. Like a lot of athletes like usually treat their like NIL income almost like it's a salary when it's more like a contract. What do you think the
100%.
different what do you think the difference is, and um how should an athlete like practically be spending and managing their money?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one, I totally agree that athletes see the money that they're getting now, and it's like I've made it.
Yeah.
In reality, yes, you did, and it's real money, and it's a great opportunity. But at the same time, because athlete life cycle is so volatile
Yeah.
and really so short, you really should be preparing for the long game. Like some of these
Mhm.
athletes are making, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars in some cases. And, if you're spending like you're a millionaire right now, what does that
Yeah.
look like in, 5, 10 years? Like you had all this opportunity for money, but if you're not planning for the long game, you can wind up in some dark situations
Yeah.
later down the line just because you spent it as soon as you got it. And I,
Mhm.
and I get it. There's a huge urge to um, celebrate and enjoy the opportunity, and I think you can do that. But I think the real better play is figuring out a way to make it last for you long term.
Yeah.
Um, the the athlete, like I said, the athlete life cycle is just so volatile. At any point, you can get an injury. There can be a
Mhm.
coaching change. There can just be a difference in play style or the the university change. So many things can impact an individual athlete opportunities. And if you're not planning and thinking about that, on the front end, you don't plan for it properly and set yourself up for success long term. What I would advise all my athletes that I encounter is to set up a system with their
Mhm.
with finances where they're setting aside taxes immediately, because if you're talking about NIL deals, they're going to be taxed
Yeah.
quarterly versus one time a year like most normal individuals. So they're taxed like a small business. IRS and the government looks at athletes as small businesses.
Mhm.
And if they're not viewing it that way, now you're dealing with tax penalties as
Yeah.
well as that, those taxes that you already had to pay on top of it. So you could be
Mhm.
walking into a deal and thinking that you have $50,000, $100,000, and in reality, it's more so like $45,000, $50,000. And if you're
Yeah.
spending that, now you got a tax bill on the back end on top of
Yeah.
penalties, and can actually wind up in a worse situation than you did going into it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think building that financial literacy is very important, and
It's huge.
yeah, and especially for athletes who've obviously been athletes their whole life. Sometimes they don't have the chance to build that financial literacy, and that's why people like you and
Exactly.
other agents are here to help them navigate the NIL. So now I wanted to
Absolutely.
shift a little bit towards like looking ahead. Obviously, Pivot Athletic Consulting is still in its early stages, and you founded it pretty recently in October 2025. What do you think the next chapter looks like for the company, and what is your vision and like where are you trying to take it?
Yeah, no, that's great. Ultimately, like I said, the goal is really to help as many athletes as I possibly can, whether that's in a one-on-one capacity or
Mm,
university partnerships. Where I
yeah,
see it going is being ingratiated within the athlete landscape inside universities, being able to uh, license the curriculum that I've built and help athlete populations as a whole. But at the same time, some athletes need a little bit more hand holding and a little
yeah,
more care, and I 100% believe that's part of my mission with the company. Ultimately, I don't want clients for life. I want to be able to install, the
yeah,
system that I've built in order to help athletes be better decision makers and better architects of their, career beyond sports. And once
mm,
they, have a good understanding and feel good about where they are, like I'm good, I'm great, I'm here as a resource,
yeah,
but I don't necessarily you don't need to have me for life.
yeah,
I just want to be a true resource and somebody that can be trusted in the space, and not necessarily looking to pick off every deal or anything of that nature. Like I'm truly trying to educate and help athletes build better lives beyond sports. It's truly a passion of mine to help athletes understand their value within the space and beyond it, because in reality, businesses and corporate they
Mm,
love athletes as well because of the skill that they obtained on their field of play are skills
mm,
that they need inside their businesses,
yeah,
and it's critical for them to understand like you have value beyond just what you do on the field. Your stats and
yeah,
everything are great, but the skills that you created on the field are the things that businesses need and want. They can spend months and years trying to train staff on things that athletes got leaps and bounds on the field even before
yeah,
their career even started. So their value is so much higher than they even know in some cases.
mm,
And that's what I try to make sure my athletes are able to understand, like you're valuable, even more valuable than you think. Beyond the deals that you're getting today, you're so much more valuable than that.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that message, especially how you're like very passionate about your work and making sure that your athletes are cared for, taken well care of, and I really
100%.
love that. So before we wrap up, I have one last question. You've been an athlete, corporate executive, and now founder and CEO. Looking back at all three chapters, what's the most important lesson that you carried through all of them, and what do you think is like one piece of advice from your experience that our audience needs to hear?
Oh, and it's such a great question. I think for me, the one thing that carried me through all of those chapters is my relationship with Christ, and
Mm,
having um, that to lean on when times were rough. Because in each one of those chapters, there's been tough times. As an athlete, obviously, I dealt with injuries and
yeah.
and setbacks as a and just the same in my corporate career. There was some ups and downs there, and the thing that was consistent was that relationship,
Yeah.
and being able to lean on, my faith carried me through all those moments and guided me,
Mm,
to
mm,
where I am today. And I take that, with me. So for any athlete, for any person, that if I could give one piece of advice is to really hone in on that relationship. Like God is full of love. He is
yeah.
love, and He
Yeah.
wants the best for you, regardless of whatever situation you may come across or go through. He wants the best for you, and it's no. I think there's a misconception that once you become a believer that everything is going to be roses. That's
Yeah.
totally not true. But the
Yeah.
reality is He'll be with you through it all, and your story is really for someone else.
Mm,
And it's literally what I'm living right now.
yeah.
My story of injury and setback is truly what I'm able to give back to athletes, today and say that, hey, I went through this. It
Yeah.
was hard. It was tough, but I came out on the other side a better person, a better individual, and able to impact other lives through, my story and what I've been through.
Yeah, definitely. I think always having a sense of higher purpose just helps you
One hundred
stay
percent.
motivated with your work, and if something goes wrong, you're not like so stuck and kind of
Yeah,
in a bad place because of that, and you just keep pushing through it. So that was a
absolutely.
great message, and I first of all thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, man.
It was really fun to having you on. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Huge thanks to Evan for sharing his story, his insights, and all of his work will be linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and I'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.